Hello, my name is Niall McKay and welcome to Living with PSC, a podcast about the rare disease of primary sclerosing cholangitis. Now, PSC causes the bile ducts inside and outside the liver to become scarred, narrowed and eventually blocked, and leads to liver cirrhosis. In this podcast, we aim to dispel some of the myths about the disease. Today we're talking to Harriet Medeley, whose new one-woman show, Outpatient, about primary sclerosing cholangitis, or PSC, premiered at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Welcome, Harriet Medeley, and it's great to have you here. And I enjoyed your play at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. It was wonderful. And emotional, and certainly every PSCer should see it because you covered an awful lot of ground. Would you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your genesis as an actor, I suppose, and a playwright, and also as part of the PSC community?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. So I initially trained as an actor. So I started writing back in 2017, I think it was. And I have always written, initially I wrote a verbatim play, which was sort of made up of the words of real people who'd gone through something quite extreme. It was about violent crime, my first play. And for years, I was essentially just doing that. I didn't even really call myself a writer because I was sort of compiling real people's stories, using real people's words and sort of editing those together into a script and making theatre out of them. And I run a theatre company called Crowded Room who specialise in that kind of work. I suppose the thing with Outpatient is it's the first show I've ever made that is personal. It's very much about my diagnosis with PSC in 2018 and what happened around that time. And it took me a long time to sort of begin writing it because it was so different to other things that I've done. But also, I suppose, and this answers your question about the PSC community, because I was quite resistant really to sort of thinking or talking about my diagnosis for quite a long time, because it's a difficult thing to get your head around, difficult thing to deal with.
I remember I was in New York at the time and I kind of thought I had maybe a gallbladder problem. Oh, you've got PSC.
When was that?
That was 2015. What happened for you?
I basically got diagnosed by accident while I was in hospital for that, because one of the A&E doctors said, "Oh, your liver function tests are a bit funny," and actually they were 5 years ago as well. But they didn't really. I don't think they followed it up. And then my partner got me a private appointment. She was sort of panicking. So I think we all sort of knew that something potentially quite serious was wrong. But she sent me to a gastroenterologist. Everyone sort of thought this was to do with my gut because I've had ulcerative colitis since I was about 14. And he's the one who diagnosed me, this private gastroenterologist. And he said, "You've got this, but don't worry, it's not going to affect you at all." And actually he said, "You're going to Google it, but don't Google it." And then I Googled it and it said, people on average live 9 to 18 years after diagnosis. And I completely fell apart. But it was a very, very scary thing to hear. And from then I saw various doctors who all kind of said a different thing. And it was extremely frightening, extremely confusing. And I guess to an extent it remains that way, although since 2018, my disease has been stable, it hasn't progressed at all.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes in stages.
What I've heard from a lot of different doctors is that it's very variable. I think when I first got diagnosed, I did a lot of research and disappeared down a lot of internet black holes. And then still the things I find myself understanding about the illness are probably from that time, because I haven't engaged all that much with the detail of the disease or the treatments since that time. I suppose my writing of the play was my way of doing that. But the play's not hugely heavy on science. It's really about like the psychology of illness and how you can live with something that comes with such a high degree of uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think that it's brilliant. I found myself getting because you hit so many points. Obviously that you're talking about your personal journey, but for me it was a universal journey because right down to the sort of should we have kids and all of this kind of stuff. I found myself getting quite emotional during the play, which is always good.
Theatre is a way to, I guess that's how you get people in the arts, right? It's an emotional connection that you can form with people. It's not the best place for informing people or even arguing your point, but it's a place to step inside other people's shoes and explore things emotionally. So I'm glad that it affected you.
I got transplanted last year, and I'm still trying to. It hit my life like a freight train, and kind of, But you have the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stuff in there as well, which I thought was very clever. But can you tell us a little bit about your process of getting it down on paper, I suppose?
So for me, there were kind of two big parts to it. I mean, when I got diagnosed, I was beginning the process of interviewing people for a play about death. And I sort of thought that I was really naive. I sort of thought, well, why don't we talk more about death and dying? We're all going to die. Not what's the big deal, but wouldn't it be great if we could really engage people in conversation about how they feel about the fact they're going to die? And so I was going to palliative care wards and interviewing people. And, no one really wanted to talk about death. People wanted to talk about life. Sort of like, I was getting really frustrated. And then during that process, I got my own diagnosis and, of course, couldn't cope with it at all. So I knew that for the play, that was the sort of jumping off point. You've got this character who thinks she's sort of au fait with death and dying until she's faced with her own mortality. And then, of course, just turns out she can't cope with that and she kind of implodes her own life. And it's heavily based on what happened to me, but it's not, some things are entirely made up. Lots of things are exaggerated. The order of some things are changed. So for me, it was a process, I guess, of crafting a story from things that actually happened and modifying that in a way that was dramatically satisfying, which is a difficult thing to do. But I think the most difficult part of it probably was getting the tone right, because I knew, for some reason, that I wanted it to be funny. I think I thought that there was something intrinsically comic about this person who thinks they're all right with death and then realizes they're not. Of course, there could be an entirely different treatment of it where you do something very deep and heavy and sad. But I think I like work that has comedy and pain sitting alongside each other. And for me, the whole process of realizing how I wanted to cope with this diagnosis was quite an emotional journey. So I think that the play reflects that. So basically the character sort of completely panics when she gets this diagnosis, decides to sort of shut everything out because she's terrified, and wants to just like go and get drunk and go and sort of have loads of new experiences because she's probably going to die any minute. Because I was also told that I'd potentially had it for 10 years already. So when I then saw, 9 to 18 years, I was like, well, I've already gone past 9 years, so I could die at any moment, So then I think the central kind of story running through the play is the relationship between my character and her partner. I was engaged to be married at the time, and I just decided I didn't want to do that anymore. My partner had a very different reaction to me and decided she wanted to really engage with all the research and wanted to try and sort of cure it, basically. And so there was a real clash there, and I basically responded by sort of pushing her away and pushing a lot of people away. And then at the end of, I don't really want to give the whole play away, but without giving the whole thing away, uh, the character sort of realizes that all the things that actually matter to her, all the things that give her life value, she no longer really has, and she is still alive. So she then begins the process of sort of trying to claw back what she had, and she sort of embraces life in a new way, I guess. Which all sounds very neat, you know. It's not that quite that simple, of course, when you're living with it, but
it's not neat when you're in it. I had assumed that you had brought in some of that stuff for dramatic, effect. I hadn't realized quite how much of it was, your own experience. And tragedy and comedy are closer together.
yeah, definitely. I think often when you're going through something really extreme, you find that you also laugh a lot, whether it's a way of coping with it or whether it's just sort of almost the absurdity of the situation. Yeah, I don't remember finding it hugely funny at the time, but I think it was very, very useful for me and very liberating to be able to write about it, and then to know that other people have got something from it is amazing. I'm very conscious as well of the fact that this is my experience, and I haven't yet experienced any kind of major health scares that are definitely related to my disease. So it's very much like one is just my experience of it. But yeah, I would hope that the psychological challenges that I experienced with that diagnosis will be relevant to a lot of people.
Yeah, I didn't know that you were already examining it through the play medium, and then discovered that you're kind of in it.
It was so kind of coincidental that it would almost be sort of bad writing to to put it together, but it is what happened. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Although maybe on some level I was looking into that for a project because I was quite scared about my own health. I don't know.
You kind of have it all there, the kind of like, if I change my diet, and then other people, well, I heard if you don't eat bread, you'll be cured. And
exactly. Yeah, that's a really difficult aspect of it, I think. And I think it's just really depends on your personality, what you do. Because I would imagine that I could live in a very sort of strict way, and that potentially would have some impact on what happens with the disease. But the fact that it potentially wouldn't is, for me, it's not like a good enough reason to do it. So I mean, I'm sort of mindful about the way that I live. I don't eat terrible food or get really drunk or anything like that. But I do quite a lot of exercise. But I basically just try and live like a balanced life, because I can't really bear the idea that if I devote my entire life to sort of beating the disease, which I know I can't do personally anyway, and then the disease suddenly worsened, I would just, do you know what I mean? I would feel very frustrated about that. So I just want to feel happy with how I'm living my life, and then the disease will do what it does, I guess.
You can't eat yourself healthy.
Yeah.
But you can probably eat yourself sick or drink yourself sick.
Yeah, for me, it's just a lot of it is just about being mindful about how things make me feel in my body. Like for example, if I eat sugar in the morning, I then feel dreadful and I've got this taste in my mouth. And so I'm just very conscious of not doing stuff like that I know makes me feel unhealthy.
I love that thing about sort of, and it's where people's minds go, and that's fine. But it's sort of like, have you done your bucket list?
Yeah.
But I love her bucket list is like, well, let's go to Madame Tussauds.
Well, that's what a friend of hers says. Yeah, I don't think that specifically happened, but there was a lot of stuff like that. And one thing that happened was my partner got in touch with everybody that we knew and asked if it came to it, if I could have some of their liver. Like, what are you doing? Oh God. But it's complicated. The fact that she did that, obviously that's very sweet, and she did it because she loves me. And I think ultimately we've ended up with someone with my blood type, but it won't be her when it comes to it. It's just really, it's such an acute experience. And I think it brings out different people's coping strategies in quite an extreme way. So just while I was rehearsing the play, actually, I was hospitalized with a really horrendous infection. I was kind of vomiting all night to the point that I couldn't stand up. I had to get an ambulance. And then I was feverish, all of this stuff. So we sort of assumed that it would be something to do with my PSC, but they couldn't. They did bloods, all of that. They couldn't trace it to that. They said, actually, it probably wasn't that. I mean, I have no idea what it was. So, and lots of, I do find when you go into A&E, for example, it takes quite a long time to find someone who understands PSC.
I think the conventional wisdom is everything has to do with your PSC, like particularly infections,
Well, that's what we were saying. We were really pushing that to the doctors, so they kept me in. But then the team came to see us and they were like, this just isn't that. But then someone else said, well, it must be because it's an infection and you have PSC. But my liver function was fine. So really strange and concerning. It does seem for me, like, I don't know about you, but it's when I'm really stressed or really busy, that's often when these infections sort of crop up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. When my dad died, I was in the hospital. I was, I got up for the funeral, got out for the funeral and had to be back by 4 for my antibiotics.
And in terms of the PSC support groups, my partner is very active on them. Whenever there's any kind of issue, she'll be posting and I'd say I'm making slow steps to engaging more with it as I get a bit braver, I suppose. But yeah, for a long time it was just pure sort of avoidance. And I think the play has been a good step in, I guess, opening, one way of sort of opening yourself up, sort of putting yourself on a stage in front of loads of people and talking about very intimate things. So my partner had our baby 6 months ago, and that's been really tough because, I mean, it's been amazing, obviously, but health-wise, it's been tough. Because obviously when you have a baby, you just don't sleep. And for the first month of my daughter's life, she was extremely unwell. She was in hospital. And so neither of us slept at all. And we shared all the nights and stuff like that. And then I got really, really ill. As soon as Vita, my daughter, was out of hospital, I was basically in hospital because my body just couldn't take that level of sleep deprivation, I think, and probably that level of stress. So me and my partner have had to be quite considered about, me getting just enough sleep to sort of stay healthy whilst being able to look after my baby. And it's hard that, to feel like you're not able to just push through in the way that other people can.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'm lucky I've got a really good support in my partner. The workaholic thing is really interesting, I think, as well. It's like for me, when I got the diagnosis, I suddenly became aware of my life as finite. Obviously, everyone's life is finite, but your life feels especially finite when you have this disease and you feel like actually your life could be very, very short. So it's a bit of a blessing and a curse, I think, in that it forces you to sort of focus your mind on what you want to do and how you want to live, or it did for me in terms of my work. And then that meant that I became probably a bit too obsessed with sort of working really hard and legacy and, really suddenly wanting to become very, very successful very quickly because I may not have all that much time to do that, and then that's not a massively healthy way to go about your life, I don't think. So it's an interesting challenge and that's definitely explored in the play as well.
And I think as a writer anyway, I think there's a propensity for writers to kind of go, oh, this is really shit. This is horrible. Gosh, it might make something good.
I was reluctant to do that, but I think, of course, that's true. I hadn't even made things up before. I'd always used other people's stories because I thought that I'd never lived through anything that was particularly interesting. And it was my partner, I think, who was sort of like, this is interesting. You should write about this. Nobody else can write about exactly this. And I'm really glad I did. I'm going to be running some workshops actually for people affected by PSC some sort of creative workshops where we can sort of excavate our own experiences through writing, because I found that to be so helpful. They'll be online. Yeah, I'll send you the details.
Yeah. No, it sounds fascinating. I also liked that. Yeah, we don't know that we don't know whether she's made up her friend for a little while. Like you go, yeah, and she says that, have I just made all this up?
Yeah, because I suppose your reality has shifted in such a drastic way that it's really difficult to get your head around. So things suddenly, the way that you understand your life is suddenly all off, or it was for me. My sense of what mattered was completely skewed. And it was almost like a madness, I think. And so it was interesting exploring that in this friend that she makes, who ultimately she starts to wonder if that person's even real. Yeah, I'm glad you liked that. I also thought it was just quite funny, the idea that maybe she's made this person up before she realizes, no, of course she hasn't. Yeah.
I loved the character as well. She was great. Yeah. Just in terms of, and I do love the stuff that you brought in about Google all the time and the relationship between that and your main character.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess I thought of the play as an opportunity to explore what I wanted to explore in the first place with that other project, which was the human reluctance to discuss mortality and the fact that we all will die. I mean, having this diagnosis has forced me to engage with that in a way that I didn't expect. But I also think it can be hugely emotional and powerful to talk to people about death. And we don't do it in our culture. It's sort of treated with almost awkwardness, which I find fascinating. And I was going to say bizarre, but not bizarre, because death is really scary and death is really sad. But I think it's striking that we engage with it as little as we do.
There was a huge relationship with death and with funerals in particular, and with, wakes and stuff like that were sort of sweeping it under the carpet.
I think that's in the play is what a palliative care doctor said to me, that in the Victorian era, what was it? Sex was taboo and death was openly discussed. And in our culture, we've kind of flipped that. Like, we're happy to talk about sex, but not so much about death. Yeah. And I think that it's just not great to be in a position where you are in a state of avoidance, I suppose, of the reality. But I also think it's really important to for me, I liked the idea of making something that explored death, but doing that through comedy and doing that through something that, excavated human relationships in a way that was actually quite comic and quite light. Because this is heavy stuff. And I think with a lot of these, let's talk about death things, I don't even really engage with them, because I sort of think, oh God, that's very heavy.
Yeah.
So I was interested to find a way to talk about it in a way that was less, not necessarily less upsetting, but less bleak, I suppose, and less grim.
You opened at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which I was delighted to be there. But tell us about how it's going with the play.
We are taking it to Reading Rep on the 15th of October. We'll be there for a week. And then it's going to be on at the Lowry in November, 6th till the 9th of November. So it's these sort of short tours in bigger theatres. We're scaling it up a bit. And then I think I'll take a little break and look after my baby before my partner kills me. But my plan is then definitely to tour it more widely. And I'm hoping we'll do a pretty long London run next year, but also some national and potentially even international touring with it. So yeah, depending on the appetite that there is for that, but it looks like there is some. So I'm very excited about that. I thought that I would have got tired of performing it, but I definitely haven't.
Well, it certainly got wonderful press at the Fringe Festival, didn't it? It got a lot of love.
Yeah, it did. And I think it was interesting, like different audiences were different. I think sometimes people needed to know that it was okay to laugh. Like you'd get some quite nervous, quite quiet audiences at first who would then kind of warm up. But yeah, in general, there were lots of laughter, lots of tears, and that's what you want.
That's what drama is all about, yeah. And what about radio and stuff like that? Have you
That's a really good question. I love working in radio, and lots of my stuff has been adapted for radio. So that's also something that I'll pursue, although I haven't been looking at that yet. But I'm also talking to a few production companies about developing it for television, potentially. So yeah, I think there's a lot of places it can go. I don't necessarily have control over where it does go, but I'm very keen to let it go as far as it can.
Wonderful. And is there anything I haven't asked that I should have asked, or anything you'd like?
No, I don't think so. No. It's been really, really lovely talking to you.
Yeah, and you. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this week. For more information about PSC and for a list of people and topics we'll be covering in the near future, please go to www.pscpartners.org. That's www.pscpartners.org. PSC Partners is a non-profit organisation dedicated to providing education and support to primary sclerosing cholangitis patients. There is information and resources on the website. There is a conference once a year. There is a private Facebook group that you can also join. Also, please join our patient registry. This is an anonymous database that provides research support to the medical community who are researching this disease. Thank you very much for listening.